We got another business for you here today. It's a well established automotive repair and maintenance business. Same as we always do, I'm going to run it through, give you my first impressions, and then we're going to run through the numbers so we can see what this deal would look like when you actually break it down. You look at debt service, you look at everything involved to be able to become the new owner of it. So it's an auto repair and maintenance business based out of Wisconsin, asking 875 with cash flows of 272 on 1.9 million in revenue. So not too bad a multiple, a little bit on the higher end. Over what is that, 30 years in business, 1.9 million in revenue, so pretty decent size. Not the greatest net margin by any means, but that probably incites that this is somewhat hands off, meaning there's probably a good team that runs maintenance and back office and things like that. That would be about right in terms of margin. Sunbelt, I haven't dealt with Sunbelt in this area, I don't think, but Sunbelt usually is pretty decent. Can't comment on this particular brokerage or this particular location. So automotive repair business over 25 years, high visibility area, which is somewhat key for these types of companies. It's not really just all about ads or all about SEO. Sometimes it really is about location, just having the visibility all the time. But inevitably, you can still combat that and you basically make up the gap with SEO and ads and solid reviews and everything like that. Fully equipped, we got certified techs, oil change, transmission works. They got kind of the foot in the door services, and then full alignment or diagnostics, repairs, everything else. 8 bays. So this is the thing with these types of companies, with like auto repair companies, you don't really have expansion potential in the same way you do with, say a service based business. So a typical like cleaning company or something like that, because you're limited to what the location can do. So typically the expansion in these types of companies, one is obviously hiring more techs, offering more hours. So you go from maybe 9 to 5 to 9 to 9, or you offer weekends, or you offer holidays, or you expand that way and you can increase capacity. You're not talking about doubling the company, but you're talking about adding 20, 30, 40% in top line, which floats down to the bottom line as well. But your real expansion over time. So if you wanted to take something like this, doing 300,000 and get it to 1 million in cash flow, you have to continue acquiring. And that's either synergistically, so acquiring like a used car business, or just launching a used car business where you take stuff that just is on the borderline of repair, you take it in, connect it with new car dealers, and then offload and consign the car to sell it off for them, and you collect your money in between. Or some variation of. If effectively you're having to buy synergies or launch synergies to continue expanding the profit potential. But that doesn't mean you can't still increase this by 20, 30%, and similarly do 20, 30% here until you kind of reach a point where you're growing with inflation at that point. So 8 bays, you'd have to really investigate when we see the size of the location. Maybe there's expansion to add another bay or two. But my expectation would probably be, if it's already running 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, you add a shift that goes a little bit later, and that's really your expansion opportunity. Added conveniences such as a local shuttle service, that's pretty awesome. Loaner vehicles, they're basically offering like a full service as if it was a dealership, which is pretty good. Financing options, complimentary vehicle pickup and delivery, that is awesome. So you can really get some upmarket clientele doing full pickup and delivery on repairs and regular maintenance. That is pretty phenomenal. So the thing is, this is really good in the sense of these would be some of the areas of expansion, but they're already doing it. So you may be at a point where this is probably as close to its high end potential as it could be, where you're kind of buying for cash flow, and then you're going to leverage that cash flow for acquisition or new company launch expansion to get there, because it really seems like they're doing everything that would be easy ways to grow and really attract some value. Strong reputation, community engagement, consistent media presence. Yeah, so they're really doing everything. Business operated absentee. The numbers check out. That margin checks out with that. Day-to-day operations managed by a trusted team. So, I mean, it really is one where you're buying in for the cash flow. Treat it almost like you would real estate. Obviously, business is not quite real estate. It's a little bit different. We have 25,000 inventory, 12 employees. Definitely makes sense for the size of revenue there. 190,000 in equipment. Owner focused on retirement. Yeah, I mean, it's a very good little deal where you can kind of come in, you build some cash flow. Maybe you can get some additional growth, potentially through review optimization or just adding additional service offerings, or pilot testing additional service offerings like the used car side of things. But this may be one that you're probably not going to even see that 30-40% on. I think maybe you're talking 10 or 20% potential here. And then the rest is all growth against inflation, and you worry about a secondary acquisition or launching that additional type of company. So with the used car side, we've seen some where they add a used car division. That way you kind of, you go where your repair shop is. If the car is at a point where you want to start, where you want to sell it and move into a new car, they can help you sell it. But then the further element from there is sometimes they can help you monetize it. We've seen one where they get that used car side built up, and when they're sitting on a lot of excess inventory, they approach the consigned owner and say, hey, do you actually want to make some money while it's sitting on the lot here? We can actually connect you and basically rent it out to gig workers. And that way you're maximizing your cash flows on a car that's otherwise just sitting there waiting to be sold. There's lots of ways to expand here. But with that said, let's look at the numbers. I'm just going to pull over the numbers into our QuickVet calculator here. And this tool is readily available if anybody wants to play around with it. Just quickvet.regaluscapital.com. And there's revenue, and here is cash flows. Now, what we normally have here is cash flow discount. This basically is our way of saying this is probably SDE, or seller discretionary earnings. So there's probably things in here that aren't really lendable. And what I mean by that is we've seen everything from, people's beer budget for the boat to, paying a kid to like a son or a daughter just to mitigate on tax, which unless you're paying him and giving a W-2 and everything else, there's no real great way to have a lender look at that. So cash flow discount, I'm going to leave it on the lowest setting, which is 15%, basically just assuming this is SDE. So not really what a lender is going to look at. Really, it's just a made up number to account for all the different benefits that an owner gets, and bring it back to something more like EBITDA, or earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, or what we would really call cash flows. So cash that you can pull out and throw on a bonfire in essence. So we're going to discount by 15% to get there. Might be a little bit aggressive, just considering it's already run absentee, but I think this is going to give us closer to a realistic number. I'm going to offset by just assuming we're going to negotiate some working capital in the business. Usually we strive for 2 to 3 months just left in the business. I'm going to assume we're going to get something like that. And because it's absentee, I'm not going to assume any type of operator costs. I'm just going to assume it purely runs by itself. And we'll do this assuming there's no investor. So you'd be putting up 5% into the deal to make the deal happen and get a small seller note to make it work. Because again, it's a retirement age owner. They're probably interested in making sure you're set up well. We'll hit calculate here. And so to talk you through, there is another video that talks through all the details here, but I'll just recap it high level. So key assumptions that we've made in these calculations: 10.25% interest rate, just basically the max of what SBA would offer. Just again, we like to be conservative. Amortization period, 10 years, pretty standard for an SBA 7A loan. Due diligence and closing cost, 4%. So that means if it's $1 million deal, 4% against that million is what we're assuming is due diligence and closing costs. Buyer cash injection, we're assuming that you're coming in with 5% to get the deal done. And so as you can see here, it breaks it all down. So $35,000 has been assumed here in closing and due diligence costs, $45,000 in injection to get it done. And then there is things like the SBA guarantee fee and things like that that we've rolled in to the loan amounts here. So what this looks like, what we're typically shooting for is a DSCR 1.5 or more, meaning we're covering the cost of debt service by 50% or higher. All the better if it's double or more, meaning if you're paying $100,000 towards paying off the loan, you're making $200,000 ideally. That way you have lots of wiggle room if stuff happens. And then here we have 3 scenarios. We have a scenario as if the seller takes 10% as a seller note, if the seller takes 20% as a seller note, and then whatever it takes to get to a 2 times debt service ratio. So that way we have that wiggle room to play with. But you'll even see here in kind of the more stretched scenario of only 10% as a seller note, sellers basically holding $87,500 as a note. you're getting a loan for $777,000, and your annual debt service, $125,000, leaves you with just under $110,000 after all said and done. And that's in a business where you don't really have to do anything, right? It's absentee as it currently sits. You just have to worry about, how do I add 10, 15, 20% in top line revenue that'll float down to my bottom line, which in essence would make up the difference to make this about a 2 times debt service ratio. Or we look at this scenario here, just about 15%, 16% in reality. Have the seller hold just 140,000. They're still getting hundreds of thousands of dollars cash on close, right? They're getting basically 600 and some change cash on close. Loan amount for 723,000. Your annual debt service is 116. Your net cash flow is 116. So not a bad way to buy your way into roughly 10,000 in net cash flows on a monthly basis. And obviously, as you pay down debt, that'll allow you to free up additional cash flow and kind of get to that point where you can start reinvesting in scale. So, pretty interesting little business for sure. The link to this is going to be down in the description. If you're on YouTube, definitely hit the like button, hit subscribe. We do these whenever I have a chance to do them. But if you're in Facebook, go ahead and hit like, but also join us on YouTube. We post these there first. But looking to